Did NATO expansion violate the 1997 treaty between Russia and Ukraine? It's a question that appears often in debates about the roots of the Russia-Ukraine war. To answer it properly, we need to look at what the treaty actually said, and what it didn't. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and share. Now let's break it down. In 1997, Russia and Ukraine signed a landmark agreement called the Treaty on Friendship, Cooperation and Partnership between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. It was meant to stabilize relations after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had dissolved in 1991. Ukraine became independent. Russia emerged as the largest successor state. But tensions remained, especially over Crimea, borders, and military arrangements. The 1997 treaty aimed to settle those disputes. So what were its key points? First, Russia recognized Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. That included recognition of Ukraine's existing borders, including Crimea. Second, both sides pledged not to use force against each other. Third, they agreed not to allow their territory to be used in a way that would harm the security of the other party. Notice something important here: the treaty focused on bilateral relations, Russia and Ukraine, not NATO. There is no clause in the treaty that explicitly bans Ukraine from joining military alliances. That's crucial. Now let's talk about NATO expansion. After the Cold War, NATO gradually expanded eastward. In 1999, Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic joined. In 2004, several more countries, including the Baltic states, became members. Ukraine was not part of NATO at that time. However, in 2008, at the 2008 Bucharest summit, NATO declared that Ukraine and Georgia will become members of NATO in the future, though without a timeline. Russia strongly opposed this move. Russian leaders argued that NATO expansion threatened their security. Some have claimed that Western officials verbally promised in the early 1990s that NATO would not expand eastward, though historians debate the scope and legal status of those discussions. But here's the key legal question. Did NATO expansion violate the 1997 Russia-Ukraine treaty? Legally speaking, the treaty did not prohibit Ukraine from seeking NATO membership. Ukraine, as a sovereign state, retained the right to choose its own alliances. That principle is also embedded in broader international agreements, including the Helsinki Final Act, which affirms that states are free to choose their security arrangements. So from a strictly textual legal perspective, NATO expansion, even potential Ukrainian membership, did not violate the treaty itself. However, Russia has sometimes argued something slightly different. Moscow has claimed that Ukraine moving toward NATO could violate the treaty's clause about not allowing one's territory to be used to harm the other party's security. In other words, Russia argues that NATO military infrastructure in Ukraine would threaten Russian security. But that interpretation is controversial. First, Ukraine did not host NATO bases after 1997. Second, NATO membership does not automatically mean foreign bases are installed. Third, the treaty language refers to direct harmful use of territory, not potential future alliances. There's another key development. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea following Ukraine's political upheaval and the ousting of President Viktor Yanukovych. That annexation was widely condemned internationally. From Ukraine's perspective, and that of many international legal scholars, Russia's annexation of Crimea was itself a violation of the 1997 treaty, which explicitly recognized Ukraine's territorial integrity. In 2018, Ukraine formally terminated the treaty. So when people argue that NATO expansion violated the 1997 treaty, they are usually making a geopolitical argument, not a strictly legal one. The geopolitical argument goes like this. Even if NATO expansion didn't technically break the treaty, it undermined the spirit of partnership and security balance envisioned in 1997. But legally speaking, the treaty did not grant Russia veto power over Ukraine's foreign policy. Ukraine remained a sovereign state with the right to decide its own alliances. That distinction between legal violation and geopolitical grievance is essential. It also explains why interpretations differ so sharply depending on perspective. From Moscow's viewpoint, NATO expansion represented encroachment. From Kyiv's viewpoint, NATO was a security guarantee, especially after 2014. And from a treaty law perspective, the 1997 agreement simply did not contain language banning NATO expansion. So the short answer: no, NATO expansion was not a direct violation of the 1997 Russia-Ukraine treaty. But the broader political and security tensions surrounding NATO enlargement played a major role in the deterioration of relations between Russia and Ukraine. Understanding that difference helps us separate legal facts from political narratives. And in discussions about international law, that distinction matters. If you found this breakdown helpful, consider subscribing for more deep dives into international treaties, geopolitics, and global conflicts explained clearly and objectively. Thanks for watching.